The sporting world is still reeling from the news of the passing of Mike McCallum, a man who became a world boxing champion in 3 weight classes, a 7-time Jamaican Sportsman of the Year, and an inductee in the International Boxing Hall of Fame, Jamaica's greatest fighter.
Mike McCallum, we love Mike McCallum. Come follow me now. Mike McCallum, come down, Mike McCallum. Jamaican pride and joy is Mike McCallum.
He was the first Jamaican boxer to win a world title as a professional. He became the WBA welterweight champion. He would later take the WBA middleweight crown and the WBC light heavyweight title. While McCallum was able to take a good punch, he had epic wins over Julian Jackson, Milton McCrory, and Don Curry, and gave a lot more than he got. Hence his nickname, the Bodysnatcher.
And there is a left hand by Mike McCallum that came out of the blue.
And his professional record stood at 49-5-1. He died on May 31 at the age of 68 in Las Vegas. His legacy, though, is unmatched, and he will go down as a sporting hero in Jamaica. Mike McCallum.
Yes, so we are reflecting on the life of the legendary boxer Mike the Bodysnatcher McCallum, who passed away suddenly at the weekend at the age of 68. To help us put into perspective the magnitude of the Hall of Famer's legacy is Gen Sec of the Jamaica Boxing Board, Leroy Brown, who is also a long-standing journalist and boxing judge as well. He knew Mike McCallum well. And Leroy, unfortunate that we brought you into the studio to discuss an unpleasant story, but Mike was pretty special. Both the World Boxing Council and the World Boxing Association issued statements today glorifying his contribution to the sport. And we just saw that memorable left hook knockout of Don Curry, which was one of the most sensational victories of his career, because at the time, Don Curry was, in many people's books, ranked or rated as the best in the world, pound for pound. Was that his most glorious moment?
I think so, and I think that is one of the best knockouts. It's still in the archives as one of the best knockouts in history. There was a little bit of trepidation in the earlier round because Curry really took it to him.
But he had speed. Curry had speed that was really difficult to deal with,
And, Curry was undoubtedly a great boxer. So when Mike caught him in that left hook and put him flat on the back, you knew it was over. And, that just went down in history as one of the greats.
Yeah, there are a lot of stories about Mike McCallum not fulfilling his overall quality because people were afraid to fight him. And because he was so good, but he may not have been as marketable as a Tommy Hearns and a Sugar Ray Leonard, people didn't want to risk taking him on. Of course, he had spent a lot of time at the Kronk Gym where he sparred with Tommy Hearns, who reportedly, he embarrassed Tommy Hearns repeatedly during sparring sessions. You can probably verify some of those stories. But do you think it is true that Mike McCallum was hindered from having a more glorious career because people sidestepped him?
There was no doubt about that. And one of the problems Mike had, he never had good management. Because first he was with Don King, and then he didn't like what was happening there.
He thought Don King was taking too much of his money.
Right. And, there are lots of stories where that is concerned. And, I was very close to Mike, so he would tell me things that were happening. So he left Don King, and people used to say, how could he leave Don King? But when you know the intricacies beneath there. He had a relationship with Emmanuel Stewart. Now, unfortunately for him, Emmanuel Stewart also had Tommy Hearns. And Tommy Hearns was his godson.
And he was a marquee fighter in the Kronk Gym.
Of course, right. So, they were there in the gym, and they were rivals, pleasant rivals. But whenever the breaks came, as a matter of fact, it is an open secret that the Roberto Duran fight was offered to Mike McCallum. But of course, Emmanuel Stewart was in there, and he had to make the final decision.
And he put Tommy Hearns
And he
in
gave it
instead.
to Tommy Hearns.
And Tommy knocked out Robert.
Tommy knocked him out. This is what Mike McCallum would have done to him. I know one of the tragedies where Mike is concerned, he never really earned that big purse.
Yes.
You know, I would say Mike McCallum to boxing is like Usain Bolt to track. I put it in that category. The big difference is that Bolt with his management was able to soar financially, and Mike McCallum never did. And this was one of the tragedies in his career.
Yeah. It's interesting you say that, because Usain Bolt is the only other Jamaican superstar with as many Sportsman of the Year awards as Mike McCallum.
Right.
Both of them won 7 Sportsman of the Year awards to be the most prolific in that award. But you just made that comparison with Usain Bolt, and from a Jamaican context,
Right.
in the sense of iconic Jamaican sportsmen.
Absolutely, no doubt about that.
Yeah. Can you talk quickly about the sort of trigger that Mike McCallum was for Caribbean boxing success? Because after his title success in 1984, Trevor Berbick became a world champion, Lloyd Honeyghan became a world champion, Trinidad and Tobago's Leslie Tiger Stewart became a world champion, and then a plethora of Guyanese, Andrew Sixhead Lewis, Wayne Big Truck Brathwaite, Vivian Harrison, so on. So over the ensuing years after McCallum's rise to the top, there came a time when a lot of Caribbean boxers became world champions.
Yeah, he was the man you should follow. And the thing with him also was that the kind of person he was, he mixed with the youngsters. He would talk to people, he would encourage people. You know, he was one of the nicest person I've ever seen in boxing. And his whole attitude, he never had that braggadocio attitude.
He was
But
confident, though.
I was just coming to that. He was extremely confident in himself. And as a matter of fact, one of the hardest workers I've ever seen. As a matter of fact, we used to have a little problem. After a while, himself, Emilio, and myself were a team.
Emilio Sanchez was his
Was the
coach when he was an
yes.
amateur.
Right,
Yes.
right. First, I must say, though, Thiele was the man who brought him up. What is Thiele's name now? The name slips me at the moment. But Thiele was the man who brought him into boxing and really took him forward. And then when he went on the international scene, then Emilio Sanchez took over. And we would map a training program for him, but he would always want to do more. I remember one evening, Emilio came to me and said, Mr. Brown, talk to Michael now. I tell him he must rest and him want to go train again. No, you know, this is unusual, because boxers are usually staying away from training. But Emilio is quarreling with him. So I had to sit him down and I said, Mike, part of the thing is you have to eat well, train well, and you have to rest. You have to give your body a chance to recuperate. And this is Austin Taft was the man. Austin Thiele Taft, right. And he really brought McCallum. And you know, from one of these little gyms in the backyards, somewhere in the Waterhouse, Tower Hill area. So Thiele, he owed a lot to Thiele. And Thiele was a gentleman, and he was able to mold him. And it really came forward. And you know, he made him into this great champion that he was.
I'm going to ask both of you the same question, because I know, Sir Lance, that you'd have been covering him from the time he came into journalism, and you'd have interviewed him so many times as well. Yeah. So my question to both of you, how will you remember Mike McCallum, and just for the younger audience to try and gauge who he was outside of the world titles that he would have won? How do you remember him, Sir Lance?
Well, I remember Mike McCallum as a student of the game, and he was very, very keen on assessing his opponents. There are a lot of times when McCallum would sign to fight someone, and because I was so much into boxing at the time, and I had so many regular discussions with him, he would call me and ask me, what did I think about this opponent, and how does he think he should approach the fight? So I remember him being very receptive, easy to talk to, and a real gentleman. Leroy said it just now. He was extremely confident, but never arrogant, never overly boastful or anything like that. So I remember him that way, as a student of the game, but someone who was very humble and respectful of his opponents, but at the same time very confident of his ability and his know-how of getting his job done.
And to put in there now, he listened to you most of the time. There was one time he didn't listen and it cost him. And I just mentioned it, Aldamas. I was in the corner with him, with Emilio, because this was the biggest fight in his career. This was for the Pan American Games gold medal. And we sat down and we planned it, because I watched the boxers and I did the planning. I watched them and said, oh, this is what we're going to do. We said, all right, Mike, this is how we're going to fight Aldamas. First round, perfect. And he won the round going away. Then in the second round, he went against our instructions, mixed with Aldamas, and got hurt, and the fight was stopped. But this is the thing, he listened. We had a little secret. Like Lance, he always spoke to me. And I can tell you, before every title fight that night, regardless of what anybody has told him, say, Mr. B, what you have to say? And we would sit down, and I would assess the opponent. Because, I'd pull, tape of the box, and I say, all right, Mike, this is so-and-so, so-and-so, so-and-so. And I remember in one of his title fights, I said, Mike, this guy is susceptible to the uppercut. Now, what I want you to do is, a couple of times, you throw the left hook, and then in this next time, you feint the left hook and come underneath with the uppercut. And Mike knocked him out with that punch. As I said, he listened.
Yes.
And he was really a student of the game.
Yeah. I want to say one thing very, very quickly. I remember in 1991 when Patrick Patterson was named Sportsman of the Year. No disrespect to Patrick Patterson, but I was working with Radio Jamaica at the time, and I was very critical of the foundation's decision not to give Mike McCallum Sportsman of the Year for 1991. 1991 was McCallum's busiest year after he became a world champion. He fought 5 times. There was no other year, 5 times undefeated, including a revenge win over the outstanding Italian Sumbu Kalambe and a terrific draw with James Toney, who was a feared middleweight at the time. And that bout ended in a draw. So McCallum ended 1991 undefeated, avenged his loss to Sumbu Kalambe, and I thought he should have been Sportsman of the Year. But they had given it to Patrick Patterson, who had a good couple of series against England and Australia. And he did well, to be honest. But McCallum was a world champion, rated as the world's best middleweight, even though the marketing of McCallum did not accord him that. And I just thought that 91 should have been another year when McCallum was Sportsman of the Year, and he was not.
He wasn't marketed well. You hit another point there. He wasn't marketed as well as he should have and could have been. Yeah. And this is one of the problems. As I say, it is really a tragedy. Mike McCallum never had $1 million purse. Yes. And many other inferior boxers got that distinction, and he didn't. Yeah,
that's so true.
He was really fantastic.
Yeah, and we know that he was doing some good work as a boxing trainer in Las Vegas before he died. But a real tragedy to lose Mike McCallum at 68 years old, a tremendous, iconic boxing star, not only of the Caribbean, but of world boxing.
One of the dreams he had, too, was training in Jamaica.
Yes.
And some efforts were made for that to happen, but unfortunately, it never did.
Yeah. All right, Leroy, we were happy to have you talking about Mike McCallum on this show today. We haven't got the details yet of the funeral arrangements and so on, but I still think there is time for us to talk some more about Mike McCallum and the gift that he was as a Caribbean sporting icon and a world boxing star. We go to break. We'll be back with more on the SportsMax Zone after this.